Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Nick McCarthy, and I run the pre-sales engineering team here at Skuid. Skuid is the #1 toolkit to accelerate Salesforce custom app design, development, and adoption with little to no code. Our human-centric design tools allow you to quickly build applications that your users will want to use, increasing your Salesforce adoption and improving business efficiency. Now, because the seas of business app development can be rough to sail alone, we've teamed up with our friends in the Salesforce world to help you find smoother waters. In our AppHack series, each month we interview MVPs, champions, and admins from across the Salesforce landscape. Today, we're chatting with Eric Dreshfield. Eric is a product evangelist at Mowgli, a connector, a blogger, a marketer, a mentor for those new to the Salesforce ecosystem, and a community advocate. He's been working in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2009 and has experience across multiple industries, including transportation, retail, life sciences, and more. Thank you for joining today, Eric.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're known as the Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce ecosystem. So I have to ask, did you grow up in a small town and dance your way into the Salesforce landscape?
That's an interesting question. Nobody's ever put it to me that way before. Actually, I grew up in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, so it wasn't really a small town. Although today and for the last 20 years, I'm living outside of Evansville, Indiana, on a little piece of farmland, 2.5 acres worth, in a little town of 400 people. So I'm now in the small town. Get to go outside and enjoy the stars at night when I look up and things like that, which is pretty cool. But no, the Kevin Bacon thing was an interesting story. I think it was Dreamforce 2014. I'm standing in the line for a session with a friend of mine, and we're just chatting away. And she says, Eric, every time I have a question about how to do something specific in Salesforce, she says, if I don't know who has the right answer, I always come to you. And Lori said, and either you know the answer or you know someone that knows the answer. And she said, it's like you're Kevin Bacon. You're less than 6 degrees away from everybody in the Salesforce ecosystem. And at that point, my mind just grabbed a hold of that and took it and ran with it. And for a while, I called myself the self-proclaimed Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce ecosystem. Since nobody gave me the title, I kind of gave it to myself. But that's in
Awesome.
reality where that started.
That's fantastic. So now that means since we're friends, I can say I'm connected to a lot of people in the Salesforce world as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I love that. Next year at Dreamforce, I'm going to play 7 Degrees of Salesforce Kevin Bacon and see how
There
we
you
can
go.
connect to you.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. So, when we had met earlier, you were talking about how you kind of became an accidental analyst and a temp job at a call center turned into a full-time gig and then eventually into Salesforce. Do you want to take us through that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going through a rough patch in my life, had lost a really decent job with a internet service provider company. Basically, I told the president of the company he had unrealistic expectations, and something he wanted me to do in 3 weeks was going to take 3 months. And 6 weeks later, I was out of a job. After about 2 years worth of soul searching and job searching, I stumbled into a position as a temporary call center agent for a software company. They were launching one new software product and were hiring 4 people to help support the additional volume of calls they expected because of that launch. So the 4 of us started on a Monday. We got trained on their software, on their CRM, which at that time was not Salesforce, and how to support their customers with 3 days of training. And then we were live on the phone when they rolled out this new software product. And back then, by rolling out a software product, what that really meant was mailing discs to their customers, and their customers had to stick the discs in the machines and install them. It wasn't cloud technology back then. So
Right.
so I was on the phones live talking to these customers, helping them solve their problems, helping them understand the software. And over the course of about 6 to 8 weeks, while we did this, the call volume was pretty light, and the 4 of us quickly dwindled down to just me after the end of that 8-week time period. And I kept going back to my manager there and saying, "Hey, this is a great job. I really am enjoying it. It's fun. I'm learning some things, but it was told when I was hired, I was told it's an 8-week assignment. Do I need to worry about looking for another job?" And she assured me that they'd give me some notice, at least a couple of weeks if I needed to look for another job, and just keep coming in, keep doing the same thing I'm doing. So over the course of the next roughly 6 months on this so-called 8-week assignment, they had trained me on all the software products that they had. I was basically functioning as a regular call center agent, like the rest of the members of their team that were out in their San Diego office, or some of the people I was working side by side with in their Evansville, Indiana office. But I was still a contract employee on that so-called short-term contract. And about that point in time, after being there 6 or 7 months, I get a phone call from their HR department, and they said, "Hey, Eric, we have a full-time position in the call center. It's doing exactly what you're doing today. However, as a company employee, there's benefits, there's more pay. Are you interested?" And as I mentioned, I was coming off of 2 years worth of what I like to call underemployment, because technically I had a job that whole time, but it wasn't
Mhm.
enough for me and my family to really survive the way we were used to. And so I was excited about the opportunity. And she's like, "Great, there's an interview process." It's like, well, okay. I interviewed for the job once and I got it. I can do it again. So a couple of days later, I get on a phone call interview with the vice president who's over this call center and a whole bunch of other things at this company. She's in their San Diego corporate office and I'm in Evansville. And she says, "Eric, I've reviewed your performance as a call center agent for us, and I know why you're still here. You do a great job. Your customer satisfaction scores are top notch. Everybody likes you, and you solve our customers' problems really quickly." And she goes on to say, I've looked at your previous work history of all the places you worked before coming here. And she says, "And I really just have one question I want to ask you." And my mind, with its little struggles with imposter syndrome, thought to myself, "Oh, great, a one question job interview. I think I'll just get up and walk out to the door now and just go home and call it a day." I was pretty worried about it at that moment in time. And she
Right.
hits me with this question and she says, "So why are we wasting your time and ours having you support our customers when there's so many other things you can do to help this company move forward?" And I had no answer for her other than, "The call center agent position's the only thing you have available." So that's what I said. And she said, "Well, that's true today, but give me 3 weeks. I'm working on a business analyst position that I'm going to get approved. And that job is going to help us launch Salesforce to the call center that you're now working in." And she says, "I think you've got what we need to take that job and run with it and be successful." And my reaction to her at that point was, "What's Salesforce? I've never heard of it." And 2.5 weeks later, I'm on the job as a business analyst, rolling out Salesforce to this company with no prior Salesforce experience. And that's what I term as the accidental analyst, just literally lucking into a position at the right time and the right place, and somebody seeing something in me that said, "This is the guy that I want for this job."
That is a fantastic story. I always love hearing stories of people about how, interesting things happen in their life or their career would sort of know they weren't expecting it. Just things just sort of happen, right? So that's fantastic. I love
Yep.
that. And then also getting thrown into the deep end with Salesforce. What was that like? Like you didn't really know anything about it and you were given this huge responsibility.
Yeah, it was definitely a big challenge. That's for sure. And this was long before Trailhead existed. So the resources for learning Salesforce were help and training on Salesforce, Google a lot, and the one thing that my manager suggested at that point in time was Salesforce user groups. She said, "Find a local Salesforce user group in your area, start meeting people who are already using Salesforce, and learn all you can from them." Well, that was a challenge back in 2009. There weren't a ton of Salesforce groups around. And so I started trying to find them. And the closest the ones that I could find were 2.5, 3 hours away, or even as far as Chicago, 5 or 6 hours away from me. And
Mhm.
I said, "Here's groups I found. Here's when they're meeting." She's like, "Well, go ahead, go to those. It's fine." And so the first one I went to, I think, was in Chicago, and it was a 6 hour drive each way. Obviously, too much to do in one day. But the same day the Chicago user group was meeting, Salesforce themselves was hosting an event that by today's standards they probably would have called a world tour. I think back in the
Mhm.
day, then they just referred to it as a city tour or Cloudforce event. So I drove up to Chicago the night before and spent the entire day in Chicago at these two meetings,
Mhm.
drinking from the proverbial fire hose, meeting a lot of people, learning a ton about Salesforce and the ecosystem. And the one thing that really stood out to me from that day forward was how open and easily accessible in the people were in the Salesforce ecosystem, and how readily they were to how ready and able and willing they were to share their own stories, their own challenges, and how they overcame the problems they had. And it was exciting. It was pretty fascinating. I spent the next 6 months or so, 1 or 2 days a month on the road, driving to other user group meetings all over the Midwest. And that's kind of what started my whole Salesforce community life, if you will, and really helped push my knowledge and my career.
That's that's fantastic. Yeah, it's great that you were able to jump in there and sort of bootstrap yourself and say, I'm gonna learn this and I'm gonna, grab this bull by the horns. Can you tell us a little bit more about Midwest Dreamin'?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I love talking about. So one of the other things that my manager told me, besides the "I can't afford to send you to training, so find a user group" comment, she also said, "I also can't really afford to send you to Dreamforce this year." Um, the company had a Salesforce administrator that needed to go. They had an in-house developer that needed to go, and like members of senior management wanted to go and attend and learn more about Salesforce. And by that point, I was the business analyst, I was the reporting analyst, and they didn't have budget to send me to Dreamforce. So I watched as much as I could online, which way back in that day was like the keynote and nothing more. Um,
Mhm.
and my mind kind of did this silly little thing at that point when she said, "I can't send you to Dreamforce." I thought, well, if I can't go, let's bring Dreamforce to me. And that was the whole thing that started Midwest Dreamin'. I thought, I want to organize a conference of that's going to be Dreamforce like, if you will, and bring it somewhere local to my area and see how many people I can get to show up. So I kind of built a business plan and started searching the area for a place to hold this event and settled in on a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. They were willing to work with me with no money down to pay for the event because I presented them with this plan as to how I thought I could get sponsors, how much money I thought I could bring in from the sponsors. And they took a chance and said, "Okay, we'll give you a shot. We'll do it." And I managed to pull off this event with 5 or 6 sponsors, and had about 100 people show up for a full day event, all about Salesforce at a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. And this was May of 2011 when that took
Mhm.
place, the very first time Midwest Dreamin' ever happened. Um,
Wow.
More recently, it's been in Chicago for the previous 6 years that it happened, 2014 through 2019, with anywhere up to 900 people attending every year.
That's amazing. That's fantastic.
Pretty
We actually
exciting,
have a
yeah.
question in the comments here. So someone was asking that due to the pandemic has led to a lot of the dreaming events being canceled, but they're starting to come back. What has been your experience around that? And they also asked if you have any experience with the Tahoe Dreaming event that happened recently.
Yeah, actually, I was at Tahoe Dreamin' just a few weeks ago, live and in
Oh,
person,
cool.
which was exciting for one thing to see in person events again and to actually get to meet and visit with people face to face. That was really cool. That hadn't happened in quite a while. Tahoe Dreamin' has been one of my favorite Dreamin' events as well. I've attended every year except one for in Tahoe's life. As far
Mhm.
as the pandemic and Midwest Dreamin' goes, we as a Midwest Dreamin' team decided not to hold anything in 2020 or 2021 based on the
Mhm.
pandemic, primarily because most of us on the team at Midwest Dreamin' decided or felt like the biggest thing that people get out of the community led events is the in person aspect of the conference. That what I like to call the random collision in the hallway of meeting somebody
Mhm.
there who you didn't know was going to be there, and you found them and you want to talk to them. That's super hard to do in a virtual world and through all the virtual platforms that are out there for hosting events. So we decided we'll just sit back and relax for a couple of years, let the pandemic run its course, and just see how things go. We did have Midwest Dreamin scheduled for 2020, and we had some decent registration numbers coming in by the time we had to cancel due to the pandemic. But we are scheduled again for July 20th through 22nd at the Hyatt Regency in Minneapolis next summer. Registration's already live at midwestdreamin.com, and we've got some pretty decent registration numbers coming in already. At this point in time, we don't expect any COVID impacts this coming summer. Hopefully, we won't have to punt and pull back or change things. But assuming we have no restrictions on the size of the event, we're hoping to see like 1,000 people this year, which would be the biggest Midwest Dreamin ever.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to talk to my marketing team. I know they're listening to this, and see if I can get budget to come visit Midwest Dreaming. That sounds fantastic. I'd love to join.
Sounds awesome.
Actually, quick, interesting question, or just my silly question. Since you've been a Salesforce MVP for a while, now when you go to Dreamforce, does the MVP treatment include, like, you get backstage passes to the rock concert or things like that?
We do get some unique perks as MVPs. That is true. I don't recall backstage passes to the concerts, but things like priority seating at the keynotes, for example, or getting product knowledge about things coming down the road sooner than other people. So we get a view of the roadmap and some of the forward-looking statement items prior to the general public, which is really pretty neat to help us understand what's coming and how things are going to look. And I think probably the biggest benefit of the MVPs is simply having the easier access to Salesforce executives. And if we have an issue with Salesforce or a problem with the product or things like that, it seems like they're a little bit more receptive to hear about it from the MVPs than from the general public. And now that's not to say they don't listen to the public. Obviously they do. The whole ideas community and ideas board that's out there where people can submit their own ideas for future enhancements and vote all that thing up. Salesforce takes that super seriously and tries to accommodate all those things. But it's a unique experience as an MVP and not something that most of us take very lightly. We really appreciate all the things that Salesforce does.
Excellent. Well, that leads me to my next question. Actually, you went right easily into it. As a past analyst and product evangelist, and knowing sort of what's coming down the pipe, what are you really excited about what's coming in the future of Salesforce in terms of, things getting upgraded, maybe things getting retiring that we don't use anymore, or any exciting new features?
That's a great question. And considering the recent, I guess it's still recent enough to call it recent, the recent acquisition of Slack by Salesforce, I think we're going to see a lot of cool things because of the Slack integration and what's going to happen there. From the retiring perspective, probably by now everybody's heard about Process Builder and the fate of all of that and everything going over to Lightning Flows. So there's a little bit of a challenge for some people to overcome that, but I think there's plenty of time on the schedule for between now and when that retirement's actually going to take place to allow everyone to redo the way they're building the automations and things like that to make things still work for their companies and their customers. So it's always interesting to hear where Salesforce is going. My own gut with the Slack acquisition kind of tells me, if you think about the history of the collaboration tools that Salesforce has utilized, 6 or 7 years ago they announced Chatter as a tool, which was kind of neat at the time. If you go a little bit further forward, they acquired a company called Quip, which kind of brought more of the document management piece into that collaboration aspect and the conversations around documents and tools and things of that nature. And then now with Slack being brought in to help almost complete that whole cycle, the first thing that I thought of when I heard about the Slack acquisition was they're going to take that and rebrand it and call it the Collaboration Cloud. Now, I haven't heard anybody at Salesforce use that term yet, so maybe they'll pick up on it and decide to use it. And for me personally, it would just be kind of fun to realize they stole a name from me. But I don't have it patented or trademarked or anything, so it's allowed. I suppose it's okay.
I mean, I would think you'd want to patent it. Like, I think we can call this as the first official naming of it. So every time when Salesforce does create it, every time somebody says it, I think you get like 5 cents or something. So, you should get some royalties on that name. It's a good
Sounds
name.
awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Do you have a lot of experience with Slack? Do you use it in your everyday, or do you like
Yeah,
speaking?
we use it at Mowgli where I work. I used it at my previous company as well, and I am in I'm in probably too many various Slack channels for other communities like the Salesforce MVPs and the Salesforce user group leaders and a few others as well. So unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Slack notifications are usually firing pretty quickly on my phone, and it's occasionally hard to keep up with them all.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have the same challenge sometimes, but it is a fantastic tool. Tell us more about Mowgli. We'd love to hear more about what you do there
Yeah,
and how the company
absolutely.
is.
So Mowgli as a company has been around for probably 12 to 15 years. On the App Exchange, we have a really robust and user-friendly product for native to Salesforce text messaging, MMS, SMS, WhatsApp messaging, native inside Salesforce. The way we price it, we offer an unlimited user license, and then there's a sliding scale based on the number of messages that you anticipate and that you're going to be using. But the whole thing that really attracted me to Mowgli was where the company got started in the first place. The company's founder was working with a with an organization called Nuru International over in Kenya, and they were trying to figure out a way to better communicate with rural Kenyan farmers around crop disease and things they needed to do to protect their crops, ultimately with the goal of eliminating extreme poverty and hunger in the sub-Saharan regions of Africa. And what ultimately came out of that, because these farmers, they lived in mud huts, they didn't have access to running water or electricity very much, but they did all have flip phones back in the day when you had the little flip phones with just a little bitty screen. It wasn't
Hmm.
anything like smartphones like we have today. But what happened out of that was the founder of Mowgli built a text messaging app that Newer International was able to use to communicate with these rural farmers about crop disease, the weather, you name it. And what came out of that was the product that you see today on the App Exchange. And Mowgli itself, the company name, came from that experience back then. It's an acronym that stands for Mobile Global Impact, because organizations use Mowgli around the world to provide impact on their clients and for their constituents and their customers. So it's really a cool product, and the whole story behind it is really fascinating. And if hopefully I told it pretty well, you can find it on Mowgli.com as well to learn more, of course.
Yeah, that's great. I would love hearing about companies that are having a strong impact on the world around us. So that's fantastic. So yeah, everyone who's on the stream here, please check out Mowgli online. So tell us more about Salesforce from the aspect of getting started. You had to bootstrap yourself up in a time when there were little or no resources. You had to learn a lot. The landscape has completely changed since then. You had mentioned Trailhead, but there's many other things like Midwest Dreaming and also a lot of other user groups and things. Tell us about people who are just getting started. Any advice you have for them for not getting intimidated and how they can make connections and how they can learn?
Yeah, definitely, and that's the hard part for sure, I think. Um, but I think the one thing that I would probably give as the top piece of advice is find someone to be a mentor. Find Get out there in social media or on the Salesforce community and start listening to conversations and see who you can discover talking about Salesforce in a good way, sharing lots of knowledge, and don't be scared to just simply approach them one on one and say, "Hey, can we have a conversation? I'd love to learn more about Salesforce. I'd love to hear your own journey and how you got to where you are today." I do that with a lot of people all the time. I'm certainly open to those conversations. I love talking about Salesforce and what it can do for your career. It certainly has helped me and my family over the years to be able to live a good life and enjoy lots of things that we may not have been able to otherwise. So,
That's great. So wait, I want to know. I've heard about this bacon breakfast at Dreamforce. Can you tell me about that? I mean, when I come to Dreamforce next year, I have to attend, and I also love bacon. So
Yeah,
tell us a little more about
absolutely.
that.
So the first year I attended Dreamforce was 2011, and I saw somebody post in what today we would call the community. I don't remember exactly what it was back then, but I saw somebody post about a breakfast they were hosting at Dreamforce specifically for people who were first timers to Dreamforce. And I thought, well, that's neat. I'd love to go to this breakfast. It'd be cool to meet a few people. It was happening the very first morning of Dreamforce, so right
Hmm.
before Dreamforce really got started and fired up. And in 2011, I think there were maybe 30,000 people attending Dreamforce. So by today's standards, that's pretty small. So I
Yeah.
went to this breakfast. It was at the basement of Sears Fine Food up at Union Square in San Francisco. And I think there were about 15 people who attended. Had a great breakfast, had lots of great conversations, met some really cool people. And the one thing that surprised me so much was how often I ran into those 15 or 20 people throughout the course of the week in that crowd of 30,000. So when the following year rolled around, I sent a message to the woman who organized that breakfast and I said, "Hey, are you doing the breakfast again? Because it was great. I'd love to join it and help you promote it and be a part of it again this year." And she said, "Well, unfortunately, Eric, I don't work in the Salesforce ecosystem anymore." And she said, "So if you want the breakfast to happen, that's on you." Well, that's all I needed to hear to grab that bull by the horns and run with it. I contacted Sears Fine Food and said, "Hey, I want to do a breakfast Tuesday morning of Dreamforce Week in your basement. Probably have 25 or 50 people show up. Is that okay?" And they said, "Sure, that's fine. We'd love the business." They also said it'd really be great if we could do one check for a party that large. So I thought, well, I can figure out a way to do that. So I launched an Eventbrite page. I sold tickets to the event for 20 bucks a piece and paid for the breakfast on my own. And whatever money I had left, I made a donation to at that year it was to the Benioff Children's Hospital. But the
Oh.
reason the whole thing became known as the Bacon Breakfast, when I built this Eventbrite page to promote it and sell tickets, I wanted to put a password on it so that only people who knew the password would be able to attend, to make sure that people who were attending Dreamforce was the audience I was getting there. So I only promoted it within the Dreamforce community, and that's where I shared the password. And the password I chose was the letters DF for Dreamforce, the 2-digit year that Dreamforce was happening. So it was like DF 12 and the word bacon. And every year that I did this thing, I'd simply use the next year and still keep the word bacon in it. And I think it
Mhm.
only took a year before somebody referred to it as the bacon breakfast. But from 2013 forward, every year that I have been organizing the breakfast, I've been donating the profits of the breakfast to an organization called Project Night Night. And Project Night Night is a nonprofit that helps homeless kids. Homelessness hits families of all shapes and sizes and colors, and usually it's not anything that the family may have done specifically. It could be through job loss or other things, but it's certainly not the fault of the kids in the family that they're homeless. And Project Night Night provides a book, a stuffed animal, a blanket, and a tote bag to these kids so that no matter where they happen to be sleeping for the night, they have this thing they can carry with them that's theirs. They have something that's peace of mind, that's truly theirs, they can take with them no matter where they're living. And that just tugged on my heartstrings really hard. And I've supported them ever since, and probably brought about $35,000 into that organization over the years.
That is incredible. I really love that. I'm gonna definitely look them up. We're just about out of time. So, how can people interact with you? Is there a blog or social media account or anything you want to plug so they can reach
Yeah,
out to you?
absolutely. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter in several different Twitter handles, but my personal one is just Eric Dresh, EricDresh. Really creative
Okay.
Twitter handle there. I know it's my first name and beginning of my last name. I do have a personal blog site that I blog from every once in a while, thedreshonline.com. So people can find me at either of those places. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Probably the only Eric Dreshfield if you search on LinkedIn. It's not a
Mhm.
very common name. So happy to connect with people and have conversations.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate chatting with you. This was fantastic. I'm looking forward to meeting in person either at Midwest Dreamin or at Dreamforce at the Bacon Breakfast. And so thank you very much. Before we close out, I just want to announce the raffle winner. It is Jackie Medina. So Jackie, if you're listening to this app hack, we'll be contacting you soon with your raffle prize. And otherwise, everyone, thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. Have a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.